So this is the iPhone 13 and it's been on the market since 2021. And today I want to talk about it versus the iPhone 16 in 2025 and if you should consider doing an upgrade. And for those of you interested, you might even want to consider picking up a yesteryear iPhone 13 if that's something that you're looking for. So what is up guys, Nick here helping you to master your technology. Quick question, do you have an iPhone 13? If you have an iPhone 13 and you plan on upgrading it or you just picked one up for a cheap price because you just wanted to use an iPhone, you didn't want to pay a lot, share your experiences, your comments down below in the comments section of this video. Let's start by talking about price and value. So when the iPhone 13 first came out, and by the way, the Face ID is being blocked by my headphone cable. Hold on. The iPhone 13 came up with like $750 or so. Now you can find these things much cheaper and people are offloading these out of their collection of phones or their old devices when they upgrade. They're really just selling these things for much lower now. So you could actually get into an iPhone 13 now. That's SE. Let's see what we can do here for an iPhone 13. Right around $299 to $300. So that is like $500 cheaper when it came out. And right now, that is a pretty decent deal if you don't want to, sign up for a monthly payment. You want to use a prepaid carrier. And depending on where you look, some carriers are actually selling the iPhone 13 for under $200, some prepaid carriers. So right now, the value for this phone is actually pretty decent because you're getting the latest iOS 18.2.1. You're also getting it for under $200 in some cases. So it's a decent pickup, although at this point, you're basically buying a phone that probably has 2 years of software support left. So it kind of matches up to its price tag with that. Usually phones that you pay that kind of price usually get 2 or 3 updates, maybe 3 would be the most. So that's kind of where you're at with this phone. Right now it's missing Apple Intelligence. That's the main thing it's missing, but you can still use things like chatbots and stuff like that on here. So that's fine. That works. And then the iPhone 16 is still the full price tag. Right now you're going to pay near $1,000 depending on your storage. You can get it around $850 or so if you're going with the lowest tier, but when you start getting a case, a screen protector, you get a higher storage capacity, you're close to $1,000 for the iPhone 16. So this is no cheap phone right now, but it definitely offers nearly most of the same things with a few critical enhancements. We'll talk about what those are as we go forward here. The first one I want to talk about is a design comparison. Now, when I first pick up the iPhone 13 here in 2025, I feel like this does have a really nice industrial feel, very flat edges. It was one of the best, I think, knockout successes for Apple, the iPhone 13. A lot of people still have this. You probably know people that still have this phone. Now, the iPhone 16 is a natural evolution of that device with more curved corners over here, and it's just a much more smoother, refined feel of the iPhone 13. However, it doesn't, to me, seem as special just because they've kind of been doing this like similar design since the iPhone 12. So this just kind of feels like a natural progression, but nothing very, very exciting to hold. The iPhone 13 was pretty decent because the 12 was the first change where they went to this more flat edges, and then the 13 was like a refined version of the 12. So this was only the second iteration of them doing this kind of build. So I definitely liked the iPhone 13 at the time. It was more exciting to me than the iPhone 16. So I feel like the iPhone 16 is the one that's least exciting between these two at the times they came out. But clearly the design wise, of course, the 16 is still winning. Just personally, I don't think going to a 16 is going to feel like a life-changing enhancement. It will feel like a nice upgrade, a nice polished upgrade. You're going to feel the upgrade, but you're not going to feel like, oh, I just got a whole new experience here. No, you're going to feel like I got a better version of what I already had with a camera that went vertical now versus diagonal. So that's kind of how I feel when I switch between these. Looking at the displays, one of the main differences here is reduced bezels. You'll see those on the iPhone 16. It's definitely pretty noticeable to have those reduction in bezels. Also, the iPhone 16 gets way brighter than the iPhone 13, although usually you really notice that more when you're outdoors, the sunlight hits your phone, you notice that more. However, the 13 was no chump in this area. It also got pretty bright, so it's still a premium display in terms of OLED, brightness, resolution is good. It's just the 60 hertz feels kind of dated. And actually with the older CPU and the newer version not running as fast as on the newer phones, The iPhone 13 kind of feels a little bit slow, if I'm being honest with you, day to day, comparatively to some of the newer products, which is understandable. But I think some of the combinations of this is the 4 GB of RAM, the 60 hertz panel, and the fact that this doesn't run as smooth to me as it did on the earlier editions. Now, some people are going to get comments and say, I have a 13. I don't know what this guy's talking about. Well, you haven't compared it to some current, modern flagship phones like I'm comparing it to myself. So I can definitely see those differences versus someone who's just using the 13 and not comparing it to another device. So for most users, I'm saying it's fine. But if you're looking for something that feels substantially faster, a lot of the newer Android competitors, as well as the newer iPhone, even this 60 hertz iPhone just kind of runs along a lot faster just because it has the newer chip. The 60 hertz doesn't really feel that way too much, but the actual performance is much better. Higher clock speed CPU. Let me lower that brightness. And we do have more RAM on here for the iPhone 16. So you definitely kind of feel that day to day, even though this is same 60 hertz. It still feels quite a bit faster to run through iOS. And that doesn't even feel like the fastest phone. So that's saying something about the 13. The 13 definitely not feeling like the fastest thing out there, but definitely can handle day-to-day tasks when it comes to performance with that A15 Bionic chipset. However, if you're looking for an upgrade to the display department, I don't think it's substantial here, but it is something. Higher brightness, reduced bezels. But if you want a more substantial upgrade in display, I would probably go to something like a 16 Pro or Pro Max. And you'll see right here, we do have the dynamic island, which to me is just another evolution of that notch over there. But it does have some functionality, which some competitors are actually copying and putting into their own Android software. So definitely Apple led the charge with that one. So when it comes to the camera, the iPhone 13 has a really great base level camera, has good focusing, and I think it was one of the best cameras for the general public that I've ever seen on an iPhone, because it required almost zero knowledge of cameras, and the aperture and everything like that, the standard 12 megapixel, this was the best iPhone camera I think ever for the consumer level. It really was. It was more simple than ever. I mean, not the most simple camera, a single camera is the most simple, but it just nailed everything. Great video, cinematic video, slow motion. It had most of what you needed. It didn't have the action mode, but I don't think a lot of people even use that. And it didn't have the longest zoom, but a lot of people seem to not care about zoom because they still bought these things in droves. So definitely an incredible camera for the target market for this phone. And today it still performs very well. I could actually shoot this video that you're watching right now on this phone in 4K at 60, and you probably would still think it's a pretty good video. As long as I got my lighting right and stuff like that, you probably would still enjoy it. Now, when it comes to the iPhone 16 camera, if you want to do this upgrade, you are going to notice some substantial changes, like the macro mode, the ability to go into 2x zoom and 10x, so a substantial increase in zoom without having to go all out for the top level iPhone. Also, you can go to video here. You'll have great 4K 60 video, and you'll have macro mode here in the video as well. So you can do macro video. So there's definitely some enhancements in that department. And you do have yourself the action mode up there. So you do have like a GoPro like camera in here. And just overall, it's just a better camera. But it's definitely not something I feel like you have to do unless you really use those extra features. But it is closer to that of a Pro iPhone camera. So the upgrades are pretty substantial. And if you traded in your iPhone 13 in 2025, you're going to find yourself getting some substantial upgrades here on the 16 when it comes to this department. And the lenses actually do look quite a bit bigger than that older iPhone, which is definitely something because those looked big compared to some of the older iPhones. So the cameras just keep getting bigger and bigger and better and better. And that's no different here. I think if you do this upgrade, it'll be noticeable. Again, will it be life-changing? Depending on if you use those extra features, potentially yes. But I feel like you really have to take advantage of the zoom and the macro mode for this to really be worth it for you. And maybe if you want better low light night photography, you'll like the iPhone 16 a bit more as well. Also, if you do want to use this camera control button and you want to get a little bit more in depth with like holding your camera and just kind of like pretending like you're using a real camera here, you might prefer this. Some people find it gimmicky. I'm starting to get used to it. After getting used to it, it's kind of fun to use. I like using it on the camera, and sometimes it's easy to just remember to use that to launch the camera. So it's kind of like a quick action button, which you also have here. but it's like in the right location for camera. So I kind of like that as well. You might like that as well if you decide to do this change. So one of the areas where the iPhone 13 really shined always was the battery life for its size. I mean, the 13 Pro Max destroyed this phone in battery life, but this one was very solid for its size, and I think it was beating the Samsung Galaxy competitor for this time. Now, this phone right here, the iPhone 16, takes it up and gets even better battery life than the older iPhone 13. So if you are looking for a battery upgrade, this is probably going to be a smart move for you. It also has a larger physical battery, so it definitely will last a bit longer. And I think what you're looking for here is to find yourself longer lasting battery. It's going to be here for you. But if you're looking for like a super extended length battery, I would go to a 16 Pro Max if you can swing that size and price. Even going to the regular 16 Pro, it's better, and so is the 16 Plus. So the 16 Plus, Pro, Pro Max, they're all better than this phone in my experience on battery, but coming from a 13, it's going to be worth the upgrade here in 2025. But if you find a 13 with a good length of like battery capacity remaining, this phone still makes it through a full day rather easily. So, it still does decent here in 2025. When it comes to software, the main thing you're missing from the newer iPhone is the new Siri. If you decide to keep 13 and not upgrade, or you wait till later, you're going to be rocking out with not the new Siri. If we go into settings here and we go back, this area right here, Apple Intelligence, where you're going to be able to use integrated things like ChatGPT, extensions like this, so you can use those, but you can technically just use the ChatGPT extension, writing tools inside of Notes, as well as a few more items like visual intelligence. If you hold all the way down with the camera control button, this is definitely something you might like, and Genmojis, as well as Image Playground. So you can go over here, and another one is Image Playground. So you can personalize your own images, and you'll be able to use Genmoji as well. So this whole entire Apple Intelligence is kind of beta. It still feels very, very early for them. But definitely it feels like something newer. If you want to play around with those features, this could be an upgrade that you find pretty fun to play around with. They both have the same like customization features though, and the general iOS is basically the same. So there's no real massive changes there. You can do the tinted icons, nice widgets and stuff like that on board on both of them. So there's not going to be a big change there. And it really just comes down to, do you want to play around with those AI features? Personally, they're fun to play around with at first, but I find that I don't even use most of them most of the time, except for maybe the visual intelligence and a couple of ChatGPT features. And they're both going to have that upgraded calculator with math notes, so that's not something that you have to like miss out on if you really wanted that upgraded calculator. That's going to be here. I know it seems like nothing, but it definitely is something, because iPhone never had history on a calculator and didn't have the math notes ability, so that's pretty fun to use. Surprisingly, one of the areas that actually feels substantially improved though is the phone like reception, and as well as the Wi-Fi speeds, the connectivity strength. All these things actually feel substantially quicker on the iPhone 16, so you have to have a little bit more patience with this stuff on the iPhone 13. It's not slow by no means, but it definitely doesn't feel like it's super snappy like the iPhone 16. So this area is actually something that I would recommend upgrading. If this is an area that really matters to you and what you do, you're going to want that. The connectivity is just much better on the 16. Also, better universal support with a USB-C attachment right there. Although that's not a faster version like the ones on the Pros, it's still pretty good that you have the USB-C on board. And audio is not going to be substantially better on the 16. It's just maybe slightly louder, I found in my experience, but nothing substantial. So I wouldn't upgrade if you wanted louder speakers. That's not really a big update here for these two. So wrapping it up here, I don't even feel like the iPhone 13 feels old in 2025. It just doesn't. What does feel old is 4 gigabytes of RAM. What does feel old is this notch, and what does feel old is lightning cable, but the actual shell of the phone, like the display, OLED still feels up to date. The camera still feels very modern. The software still feels modern. It feels like half modern, half dating, like half getting old, but like half modern. So it doesn't feel like a super old phone by no means, even though it's in its 4th year now. The iPhone 16 feels up to date and modern with an older 60 hertz refresh that feels very archaically old. So the iPhone 16 has everything you need to be a modern phone, but is missing faster charging and a better refresh. Other than that, I do think it's a good upgrade if you want to make it. However, if you've been holding on to the iPhone 13 this long and you just can't wait till the iPhone 17, you want more battery life, go for something like a Pro or Pro Max. But if you can wait, I think you're going to be much more happy than doing this upgrade now if you can wait that long, because the 17 and 17 Air options that are going to come later this year probably have bigger redesigns, as well as refresh rates of 120 hertz ProMotion across the board. So it's probably going to be worth the wait here for you. Well, thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you all in the next episode. Thank you very much for watching. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.